friends and foes. Welcome to Book Club. It's Art Book Club Day. I've got Visual Nomad here with me. Say hi, Jen.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Today we're talking about Nothing If Not Critical, which sure was a book that I read, and
Yeah.
it's we read this book. So basically, the book is by Robert Hughes, and it is a collection of 95 essays that Robert has written, mostly for the New York Times over the last, from 1980s till was it even earlier? It was like many years, mostly 1980s and onwards, through the 1990s. Yeah. And it's just a bunch of essays, a lot of essays. And that's the book we read. We read this book. First off, my favorite question, did you finish the book?
No, I did not finish the book.
Me neither. I did not read all of this book. I started.
I did not either.
I was like, when I first picked it up, I was like, there's no way I'm going to read all 95 of these essays. Because at one point I was like, I'm going to count how many, because it doesn't tell you anywhere in the book how many there are, but I was like, I can do numbers.
Right.
So I basically picked all the essays of people, like artists that I already knew about, and read those ones.
Okay, yeah. Right.
That was my strategy. How did you go through it?
I just kind of bounced around, kind of the same concept of like, oh, I kind of know about this person. Let's see what he has to say about them, kind of thing. So, yeah.
I started, when I was first reading it, like when I first picked it up, I was just started from the very beginning and just kept going through. But yeah, very quickly was like, I don't really care about this artist.
Right.
Yeah, it's organized into segments of history, basically. So it goes through, and where is the index? Here we go. So it starts off with ancestors. And then it goes into 19th century artists. And then it goes into modernism and the Americas and contemporaries. I'm going to admit, I didn't even get to the contemporary section because I was too busy reading about Van Gogh and colonialism. And so I'm sure there's some really great ones in there that I just haven't gotten to yet. But overall, I didn't love that this book is a book. I feel like I feel like this book has given me FOMO for events that happened in 1980, and
oh no,
I'm like, oh, I wish I could have been there to that one, or the other thing that happened was I would read an essay and just feel like I think you had to be there. I think you just had to be there to like it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, some of it he's writing in present tense, like there are shows that are going on in the museums in New York City, and he's referring to those because he's writing for the Times, right. So it's
a weekly
it's an article for the newspaper. So so some of it is like he's referring to things that are happening present day, but like I think it's his perspective on how America has gotten to where it is with art is extremely insightful. Like, he kind of summed up, like, you think about all these things, but to like put it together as a cohesive thought and get it down on paper, like, he did that. Like, why is America the way it is with not only art, but how that reflects how we are with pretty much everything in society, in our society. And how did we get there? Like, why are we that way? It boils down to, like, literally America is like a adolescent child. And at the very beginning, it was like a toddler. And when a toddler doesn't want to do something, it throws a fit and tries to do whatever it wants. And you have to teach it boundaries. Well, America broke away from England, which could be considered the parent. And they said, no, we're going to be different. We're going to be different than Europe. We're not going to be them anymore. And it drove us in this direction of it becomes mechanical at some point.
Yeah.
And the art market just made that even worse. Like it wasn't about the skill or the craft of sculpting, painting, drawing, creating visual mediums, that kind of thing. It was more about the perceived value of something in a social context of like, basically, like, I'm on the playground and I have a toy and I'm here to stump and say my toy is better than your toy. And it's just like, when you look at how we've like reacted as society, you go, oh my gosh, it's so true. Like, we're just petulant sometimes in what we're doing, and we just do the opposite just because. Like, for no other good reason than just because.
Do you know if Robert is still alive?
I do not know. I have no idea.
I'm gonna look that up really quick. I'm asking
Yeah.
because I feel like some of the things you talked about, I'm like, you would be even madder, sir, if you knew about it now.
Oh, yeah. It's like, even though it was written in the 90s, like, it is still totally relevant, especially the beginning of the book. It's extremely relevant. I was like, I kept asking myself, was this written in the 2000s, or like, when was it written? So, yeah, it's wild.
He died in 2012, so 10 years ago.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it felt very contemporary, especially the introduction, especially his essays that were more about, like, there's a couple that aren't about specific shows, they're just about art in general. And you're like, you're reading them and you're just like, yeah, this is what it's still like, and also you would be so much madder now. Like, one time he talks about an auction that happened, and he's like, and this art piece of artwork sold for like this much money, and that's just absurd, and like blah blah. And I'm like, yikes.
Right.
No, it's worse. It's worse now.
Yeah. Well, and he just talks about how, art was something for the public. Like, it was a way of chronicling what happened during that time. It was also a reflection of the local life that was there. You know, you talk about Pompeii. He talks about Italy, all the different places in Italy. And that's why Italy is like so fascinating to painters, and has been, is because each one of those places is unique to itself. You have to be there to see that and experience it the way it's supposed to be experienced. And like, we don't have that anymore. Like, we just have like this global perspective, and it's just become this like, oh, well, let's just turn this into art. You know, there's no meaning to it. It's just like a social icon or whatever, you know?
Yeah. I definitely feel a sort of indifference sometimes when I'm looking at artwork when it's not in its place of origin. I was traveling a couple of weeks ago. I went to Berlin with my partner and a bunch of friends, and I had a lot of fun, but I also went to a lot of art museums. And I had a moment when, at one of the national galleries there, they have a huge collection of Egyptian art. I had a moment where I was like probably like 3 hours into like looking at work at this place, where I was just like, this just feels like the same as everything else I've ever looked at in this kind of collection of style of work, and I feel no connection here. And I think it's because I'm not in the place where it was originally intended to be, or like I just, and I thought about that for a moment. I thought about how I just feel that way about certain styles of artwork, and I've felt that way in the past about maybe historical objects or things like that. And I just like, if I had been the target audience for this in the space where it was created, or it had like even some sort of content, like I don't know, sentiment that I could feel towards this thing in that space, and I wasn't just looking at this thing that was stolen by somebody, like, there's that, it would have been felt better. I don't know, that's a tangent I just went on, but
so in light of what you just said,
yeah,
let me ask this question.
Yeah.
Recently, there has been a lot of repatriation of objects to their origin countries
Yes.
and locales.
Yes.
Do you think that that is going to shift the way we view art
I think it already has. And
as a whole?
yeah, okay, this was like a big thing in Germany because Germans are all
Mhm.
about remembrance culture and about righting wrongs at the moment, like especially when
Right.
I was at in Berlin. Every single
Mm.
museum and every tag on every object on every single museum I went to talked about the origin of where they got it, whether or not it was gotten fairly
Okay.
or not, and whether or not they had tried to
Right.
return it, and whether or not the person had accepted it back or didn't want it anymore, or if it was on loan. Every single
Okay.
tag, like thousands and thousands and
Right.
thousands and thousands. I was like, whoa, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And when I went to the Seattle Art Museum recently, I saw about a bit of this too, where it was like, this was originally donated by this person who wrongfully got it from these people who have now loaned it to us, and we are paying them to keep this here for the next couple of years
Okay.
until they've built their wherever they want to have it.
Okay.
And like, so I think that sort of reparation, is that the word I want? Reparation?
Reappropriation.
Reappropriation culture is like, it's like changing. It's, things are definitely different, and where the origin of something is and like how it was acquired by places where you're just like, should these people be having this? Like, this seems like a
Right.
weird thing to be. Why is this here? How did it get here?
Right.
Like, that is one of the first thoughts for a lot of people when you're looking at especially historical work.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking
Because
of,
like
yeah.
what? Yeah. Because what I'm thinking of is like, now we will actually have to travel to that place to see that artwork in person, and we will be able to get it within some form of context of that area that it's that it was intended to be in. We will be able to see it more truthfully than what we have in the past at, say, the British Museum or Smithsonian or anything like that. I just wonder how it's going to influence our understanding of art.
I don't think
Whether
it'll
that'll
ever
shift.
go back all the way to that where you're like, you have
Okay.
to go to Egypt to see Egyptian work, because a lot of the places
Okay.
that, at least from what I saw when I was traveling just like a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the places had, they like say they had like a coffin, like a mummy coffin or something like that. Being very vague here, but that's just my example. They were like, hey, do you want this back? And a lot of these places have been like, no,
Right.
we don't want it back. You can
Okay.
keep it there. And like, or you can like with our permission, or it's on loan. So I don't think it'll ever go all the way back where it's like, you must travel to Egypt to see something Egyptian. Not because of lack of trying to put it back, but
Right.
so I think
Because I know
yeah.
that they specifically, Egypt specifically has been very ravenous about reclaiming the artwork from museums.
Right.
Same with like Italy and those places, Greece, the marbles. The Elgin marbles are a huge point of contention right now.
They sure are.
Like, why the heck are they in England? Like, how did Lord Elgin get a hold of these marbles? Like, did he just like walk in and he's like, I want that, and load them up and let's go? Like, okay, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of disgusting to see the imperialism of it all,
You're making me think I should change the next book we're going to read, because I do have a book on the docket where we talk about this, but I'm like,
Okay.
maybe this should be the next book, or
I mean,
I'll
it's up to you. Yeah.
keep ruminating on this. I was like, we can get to both eventually. It's interesting. Anyways, back to Nothing If Not Critical here. Did you have a favorite essay of the ones you read?
I mean, like the beginning of the book to me was like super profound. I did like in the part where he talks about John Singer Sargent. Where is that? I believe it was Sargent, maybe not.
He does have an essay on Sargent that I read too.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember where.
This is one of those books
Okay.
where if you were going to read it, you should read it with the internet open so you can look up pictures of everything before you read the essay. Just saying, that's my caveat.
Yeah. Oh, he talks about perception, and this kind of ties into something that's current. So he talks about viewing different shows that are up at the moment, and he talks about Alex Katz
Mm.
and how they've lauded him as this fantastic artist and whatnot. Okay. I find it hilarious in light of the fact that they just did a retrospective at Guggenheim on Alex Katz, and they literally crapped all over him and said
Really?
that he was basically a horrible artist. When they got all of his art, like towards the end of his life, they're like his art was garbage. And I'm like, dude, like it's a perfect microcosm of the fact that it's like the art world and market is so finicky. They're just like, no, you're not the cool kid on the playground anymore. Sorry. And
How the turntables. Wow.
yeah, it's funny because like I know myself as an artist, I see like I'm pushed to compare myself even though I try not to.
Mm-hmm.
We've been pitted against each other as artists for no better reason than to make some kind of competition to stir up drama that brings, optics for whoever is trying to sell art or whatever. And we miss the fact of how fickle they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're dead, they'll say whatever they want about you. Like
You have
that's
no
kind
control.
of crappy.
It is
But
crappy.
yet we kill ourselves and fall over ourselves to try to make these people happy. And it's like, why? Like,
It's so exhausting.
yeah.
And what's the point?
It's like the 80s t-shirt that you had as a kid that you threw in the back of the closet that you still have. And all of a sudden the 80s are cool again and they pull you out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, look at my cool shirt. It's original. It's vintage. Slap that vintage tag on it. And it's just like, oh, so you just meet a need, like to be cool, basically, when it comes down to it.
I've been
yeah.
thinking about this idea lately, and it keeps going over and over in my head about making art to sell and make money versus making art because I want to make it. And I've thought about this in general terms over and over again, but it's like I feel I was watching a particular artist on Instagram who I really like her abstract work and I think it's quite good. And then she started making these other kinds of abstractions that were like she's calling them like palette paintings, and they are, when I like look at her like engagement numbers that you can do just by clicking insights and stuff, it's like she's getting like triple the views on these things that are taking her like no time at all to make. And I'm like, as like a marketer, my brain immediately thought, oh, you should only work on these. You should not do the other kind of art that I fell in love and followed her for. And I'm like, these will make you so much more money, and then you'll have to try less in the future to do it. And it's a funny thing in my brain. I'm like, do I like this thought about myself that I'm thinking this way? That I'm thinking in the terms of what will the market like? What will sell better? But also, an artist has got to make money. So I'm not judging her for making these other things. I'm just thinking, oh, that's interesting that she's doing this. But she's not.
Right.
It's a weird time to be an artist.
Right. So, and we've talked about this, I think, with the last book that we read. This was kind of brought up of the fact of it's drilled into us that sorry, I'm losing the thought here.
Selling art to make money versus making art because you're called,
like, right. Well, and there's this kind of like this stigma amongst artists that don't sell out. Like
Mhm.
if you make money, you're selling out. Like you have to be this tortured artist in order to be considered legit, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
I dealt with that at the beginning of when I started, like seriously painting. And, like I want to be true to, this thing in me. And, I'm going to be different. I'm going to be the different artist. I'm not going to sell out, And it's just like, is it really selling out or is it just another outlet of your creativity? It's not any different than how you create another painting that personally may mean a little bit more to you.
Right.
But you're still creating that piece. Like it still took effort for you to come up with that concept and to work through it.
I want to know who taught me that selling your work could be you are not as good as an artist. When
Right.
did that happen, and how did it happen so
Mhm.
aggressively that I still fight with it to this day, even though I have a small business selling artwork?
It's beat into us in college. It's this romantic concept of the starving artist.
Yeah.
And then when it actually happens, you're like, this sucks.
Sucks.
Forget this. I'm not going to starve. And I've come to the point where I'm like, I don't care if they call me a sellout. Like, I really don't. I can't.
I can't. Exactly. I don't think you're a sellout. I think you're just a good businesswoman.
Right. Right. Well, and it comes back to that age old competition thing of like, I'm better than this person or that person. And it's all judged on how much I sell, or how much my work sells for. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Because it's all subjective.
It's subjective.
It's all based on somebody that probably doesn't know anything about art. And they're just like, I think this is cool.
Calling people a sellout is a cop-out for actually looking at their work with any intelligence, is my opinion.
Right. Right. Well, and like 7 Days in the Art World, like she talks about the gallery owners that she sat down with. And they basically did this thing over dinner, like, oh, are we cool with this person or that person?
Right.
It had nothing to do with their work, had everything to do with, well, do I like Tom or do I like Jim? And you're like, what? Like, I thought that was true, but then when I hear that it is, you're like, really?
It's
really?
gross.
That's how this goes down. Like, I spend thousands of dollars on a master's degree, and it comes down to two dudes at a dinner with somebody else, and they just flippantly decide who is going to make it and who isn't. That's nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah. It's a lot. And at one point, I feel like in my future, I'm going to be like, am I the person at the table making these decisions? Like, will I know if I'm the person at the table making this decision? Like, am I contributing to this kind of thing? Probably.
I don't know.
I don't know.
know.
My family works in real estate, and
Right.
if there's one thing I learned is that sentiment is what sells, and relationships is what makes a sale. And I think it's a universal concept. And
oh, sure.
It just gets, the more, I guess, famous or infamous you are, I think it gets more compounded. And the moment you enter the secondary market, it's like, oh, your reputation is something that can be like measured in dollars. And like,
oh, it's absolutely, yeah.
It's wild. And I'm like, I don't know if I ever want to be there.
Right.
Sounds exhausting.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah. Could talk about this all day. It's a lot. My favorite essay in this one was about Giorgio Morandi, who is one of my favorite painters. He's an Italian artist, lived in Bologna for his whole life, was kind of a hermit, never really followed any sort of trend. In fact, to the point where people were like, hey, you want to come hang out? And he was like, no, I have to paint my 4 bottles that I have in my studio, because he painted bottles and vases, and they all got dusty, and he was just like obsessively worked on that for his entire career. And I learned something new about him, which was that he scraped out most of his paintings. And one time he was interviewed by a journalist, not Robert here, but someone else, and he pointed to his easel and he's like, well, there's where most of my paintings are. And on his easel is just like a mound of scraped off paintings, just like paint just built up on his giant easel. And I was like, yeah, that's an artist for art's sake. That is a
Oh,
painter's
yeah.
painter.
I don't have can. I guess I'm gonna have to sacrifice one.
Love it.
All right.
Love it. So that was kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Right.
I did have a thought partway through of, I don't know how factual all of these essays are now. From like the facts that, you know, the author is telling me about, I'm like, is this true? Is this what you simply knew of at the time? Is there anything else uncovered about this person? Especially how often the artist talked about how often the author talked about the artist's like sexuality and their personal lives and things like that. And I'm like, for like the contemporary, I don't know. I was like, do I believe all these facts about these artists? I don't know. I don't know how accurate we are. They did go into the New York Times, so I'm assuming that was some sort of fact checking here, but this is also the 1980s and 90s, so what do you think?
Well, and I think that's what made Andy Warhol so intriguing, is that they tried to pin him down and put him in a box.
Right.
And his favorite thing to do was turn that on its head every interview and interaction he ever had with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He was never somebody you could pin down. There were only maybe 2 or 3 people in his whole life that really knew who Andy was outside of this caricature that he had created for himself, this persona.
Right.
That was his public facing, you know, persona to people that he encountered, you know, be it business or whatever. He was a very, very shy, very intimidated human being when it came to, you know, the public at mass. Like, it scared him. You know, he was from a very quiet town in Pennsylvania, poverty, and, you know, he didn't have a lot. And, you know, people like say stuff about the soup cans and how like unimaginative it is and blah blah blah. The story behind it is Andy Warhol ate Campbell's soup every day of his life. It was a staple for him. It was how he grounded himself as a human being. I think in the midst of all of that chaos that was like around him, all these people that wanted to get at him, it was, oh, well, I always sat down with my mom and we had a can of soup because we didn't have much, but this is what we had.
Yep.
And he truly enjoyed it. Like, that was his thing. And it's just like, when you hear that meaning behind the Campbell soup, and like it was an homage to something that he loved. Like, it was personal to him. Like, when you hear that, you're like, oh, I guess they aren't so bad. Like, that's kind of cool that he did that, you know?
It is pretty cool. See, I didn't read the Andy Warhol interview. Was that in the interview? Or the
No, that was actually on a Netflix special that they did. They did a documentary.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's fantastic. If you get a chance to watch it, it's really, really interesting.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah. He had somebody come in and basically document his life towards the end of his life.
Brad.
Once he came down, well, he got shot. And at that point, I think he had somebody come in and start writing for him because he almost died and it scared him.
You never know when the end is. Speaking of the end, the number of artists that died in their mid-30s is alarming.
Oh, yeah.
If someone has died by the time Robert Hughes has talked about them in his essays, he's gonna tell you how they died and when they died, if he knows it. And I was like,
right,
this person died at 32 and this person died at 37, and this time I was like, oh jeez, I'm 32, I don't like this.
Right. Well, and it's tough. Like, I mean, be it, you know, the World War II era that they came out of, where they just didn't have much and they got by with what they had, or, you know, the 80s where drugs and AIDS was prevalent and people were dying and yeah, I mean there were multiple factors that led into that, but yeah, it's wild to know how many people have passed away at such a young age.
Right. I'm like, oh man, if you had only lived a couple more years, imagine how much more art we would have. Anyways,
I know, right?
there is a line in this book that I really liked. And it was, I forgot where, it was towards the beginning. I should have highlighted it, but I forgot. But it says, it's the topic is seeing artwork in person and how it really changes versus seeing it in a printable form, like a magazine or, you know, for us on the internet. And Robert Hughes says in one of the essays, he says, you can read Voltaire at home, but you must go to Rome to see paintings. And I feel like that really encompassed a lot of this book, where it's talking about how writers are lucky, you can read these things at your house and still get the, you know, full effect of this book. You might not be where they were written, but you can get quite a bit out of it. But to see a piece of art and fully feel what it's like to be in its presence and see the details and everything, you got to go to where they are. And we are in a much more advanced stage of the internet now than Robert Hughes was in the 1980s. And, you know, seeing reproductions online are pretty great. They're really detailed. You can go to any museum website and see some great reproductions, but it's still not the same as seeing art in person. And I feel like a lot of what Robert Hughes talked about in all of these essays is go to the show. Go to the show he was writing about. Like, he's writing reviews about these shows to get you to go to them because they're great.
Right.
Or they weren't good, but you should go anyways because that's kind of fun. And I really liked that line out of this book. And I thought, oh yeah, you got to go places. You got to feed your artist and feed your eyes and learn how to see by looking at work in person. It's kind of fun.
Well, and it's so different because, like, it's the scale of things that makes it so different. Like, you see Jenny Saville's work on the internet, and it doesn't do it justice because the size of the piece is what makes it so unbelievable. These paintings are like 15 or 20 feet high, 10 feet wide. They're massive paintings. Massive.
It's amazing.
It takes her whole body to make these paintings. And it's just like, when you stand in front of that and it just like, the painting just kind of envelops you, it's a completely different experience than, like you said, you know, seeing it on a slide or seeing it in a magazine or something like that. It's just
on your desktop, on your cell phone.
Sure.
It's totally different.
Sure. Yeah, detail or not, you just can't get the scope. You can't.
Yeah, I feel like I sell a lot more artwork when I can show it in person. It's a lot easier for me to sell than online, and I feel that I'm like, how do I get more physical eyeballs on my artwork? And my response to that was to apply to a bunch of things this week. So I did that while I was out with the cold or the flu, and that was fun. It's kind of fun. I'm like, maybe I'll get rejected. That'll be exciting. We'll see. I
mean, it's daunting, but yeah, it's exhilarating sometimes. Yeah, absolutely.
Overall, I'm rating this book a 3 out of 5. I didn't read all of it, but what I read, that's how I felt about it.
Yeah, I would give it the same. I'd give it a 3 out of 5. Yeah, because I think it's a little tough of a read. Just because, I mean, like you said, there's 90 some essays in this book. Like,
so many.
That's bonkers. It's more of a catalog than anything. I don't think he ever meant anybody to read it in one sitting.
Right.
Because it was not written like that. So
this is absolutely a book you should pick up, look at the index, pick an artist you like, read that, and then put the book down. Like, that's how you should do it.
I mean, I think it'd be kind of cool if you just like kept it as a coffee table book, where you just like or if you like kept it in the bathroom where you were just like, oh, I'm here for a few minutes, let's read this section on so and so.
Right.
You know,
You said coffee table book, and I think that's genius. They should put the essays next to beautiful reproductions of whatever picture is most important.
oh yeah.
Like, that would be
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Or if they like talk about a work, like put the
Yeah.
picture of the work in there. Yeah,
Like,
I think
New York
it'd be
Times,
great.
don't sleep on this.
Right.
Because I know
Right.
you're listening to this podcast. Anyways. All right.
Yeah, they are.
Any final thoughts on this book?
No, I just think even though I don't think he was trying to be as insightful as he was so insightful as to how things were going to play out in the future.
Yeah.
Like, if you would have told me that in the 90s, I'd have been like, what? Like, no, there's no way. Like, I was in high school in the 90s, so like I could have cognitively had that conversation with him, and I'd have been like, no, you know. But to see it now, like how internet has changed everything. 2012 came, Instagram and Facebook happened, and life has never been the same. Never.
It's wild. It's a good time.
Yeah. It's nuts. It's nuts.
It's nuts. All right. Are you ready for the next book?
Yeah.
All
What's
right.
the next book?
This is a book from a series that we started of essays. It's called Hot Topics in the Art World, and we're going to read Curating Art Now. This is by Lillian
right.
Cameron, and you can find the book here on Amazon. And it's 100 pages or so. It's an essay.
Okay.
Oh, what happened there? Okay, there we go. Now we're back. And I think it was going to be fun. We read Censored Art today, which is number 5 of that series, and we both really liked that book. So I thought, why not pick another one? They also have another book or another essay in this collection about restitution, which the return of cultural artifacts. I think we should read that soon, but this time we're going to learn about curation. I thought it'd be fun after reading a book about essays about shows that have already happened and just kind of keep this train developing. So that's our next book.
Sounds good.
It's going to be good. We have a week less to read this book, so that's why I picked a short one. We will be meeting next at the normal time, which is
October, second Sunday of October.
Second Sunday of October, which is October 8th.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be great. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I love book club.
Yeah,
book club
absolutely.
It's like the best part of the month.
I know, right? We get to have those nerdy conversations. People can listen to us.
They're amazing. Jennifer, where can people find you?
You can find me at visualnomad.art and also here on Twitch at twitch.tv/visualnomad. I will be streaming again eventually once I get this blocking done on my painting.
Yes.
So I will be back on. So yeah, I take hiatus here and there depending on what I'm working on. So, but I always come back.
You gotta take breaks, and you gotta keep people on their toes and be like, will she stream?
I know, right?
Maybe.
I know, right?
If you pray hard enough.
Gotta keep them wanting.
You can find me at stephaniescott.art on Instagram. That's also my website. Art Book Club happens every second Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. And you should get the book, Curating Art Now, and read it with us. And then come to book club and tell us what you think of it. Because I'm sure it's going to be some juicy things about this one. Because, you gotta. All right, friends.
These books are so good. Yeah, they're so good.
They're so good. If you are listening, we would appreciate a review. If you want to leave us a 5-star or a thumbs up or whatever the system is for wherever you're listening to this, that would be super. It helps us reach more artists.
Touch that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell.
Actually, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Like and subscribe.
Bye.